Good morning, everyone, here in the room in Anaheim and everyone joining us online as well. One logistical note, I encourage you to join in on the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag WindWorks. Now I want to introduce our panelists. Of course, you all know Tristan, who's already spoken this morning. Next to him, we have Karen Lane. She's the CFO of Onshore Americas for the Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy. Next to her is Pete McCabe. He's the president and CEO of Onshore Wind for GE Renewable Energy. And next to him is Greg Wolf, the CEO of Leeward Renewable Energy. So the last time this conference took place, I think most were probably assuming a President Clinton in the White House. I think most people in the entire world were making that assumption. My motto for 2017 is to make no more assumptions. So in that regard, let's start off with a pithy question. If each of you could choose one word to describe how you're feeling and thinking about the Trump administration's position on renewable energy and wind in particular, what word would that be? Tristan?
Open.
Open? Mm-hmm. Nice. Karen?
Interesting.
I think monitoring.
What was that?
Monitoring.
I'll give it a hopeful. How about that? Positive spin.
You know, these people are a lot more hopeful than a few of the people I asked last night. After a couple of drinks, maybe people got a little bit less hopeful. But there have been some positive signs. Of course, Energy Secretary Rick Perry has been a big wind proponent and oversaw a huge wind expansion in Texas. What's the one thing that you're looking for the most out of this new administration?
Is it the one-word answer as well?
No, you can go more than one.
Objectivity.
You're sticking to succinct, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, I'm not sure that the administration has really defined yet a policy for vis-a-vis wind, and I think they're still open. We are a lot of meetings with the various officials that are being appointed as the administration is struggling to fill the various seats in the administration. And we have a wide range of reaction, I think. Some are not very favorable to wind. Some, as you mentioned, Secretary Perry, are very favorable. And a lot are trying to learn more. And I think this is a WIA's job to provide that information so that we can try to, clearly the administration has an agenda, a pro-business agenda, and we are a strong business, and we're hopeful that, and open, that we can, based on objective facts, that we can help the administration to continue to support wind.
Great. Karen, what about you?
Well, I think the one thing for me would be that when Congress passed a bipartisan extension of the PTC in 2015, and I think it's really critical that remains in place because a lot of companies made very strategic decisions and made investments accordingly to how that extension was put in place.
Yeah, look, I'd say open-minded. I think tax reform, infrastructure investment, and regulatory reform done well can be terrific for the U.S. economy, for jobs, and for wind.
I'm focused on that regulatory reform piece, right? I mean, I think that's a little bit, not that we want to position wind as an opponent of the administration, but sort of that judo strategy a little bit in the sense that that's been a big push for them. And I think there's a number of areas where I think practically we should make some progress on some of the regulation that has affected us, I think, adversely over the last 3-4 years on siting, operational issues, environmental. And so if we can wisely tamp down some of those issues to good outcomes first, and then we can tackle some of the other issues later, I think that would be a great sort of outcome for the industry.
Great. And you've hinted at this a little bit, interesting in your remarks as well. There's been some widespread concern about the Energy Department's study on the reliability of the electric grid, whose substance and comments by the Energy Secretary seem to favor coal and natural gas and nuclear power over renewables. What are your concerns about that study, and what are some concrete results from that could impact you? Or do you think that it's more sort of messaging and could not have that much of an impact on the day-to-day and the growth of the industry?
So I think that it all depends what the Department of Energy wants to do with the study. The concern about how to address capacity for the fossil fuel load is very real, and I think it has to be addressed, but it has to be addressed in comprehensive market reform while looking at all the facts. And today, Wind provides some capacity, not much, but some, provides great ancillary services, provides decarbonization. And it does, for me, it does make sense that you try to revisit the market rules, as I was saying in my speech, and in a way that allows the various generation to continue to basically evolve towards the grid of the future. What I'm afraid of is that the conclusion would be made in advance, and I'm not saying it's the case because, as I said, the department is actually collecting information as we speak. But I don't want to have conclusion too quickly. I think it's very important that they take the time to think that through and really design the future market rules that we need for every technology to thrive.
Karen, do you have any comments on that study?
Well, I think he's brought up a lot of good points. I hate to sort of speculate too much because there's just, I think, so much information being passed around right now. We are involved, as I think all of us on here, trying to help educate the administration on the roles that wind does play and can bring to the party. So I'm hopeful that, again, talked earlier about being objective and listening to the information that they receive.
Yeah, I just echo Karen's point. I think objectively the facts are compelling. Right? The American public wants more wind. Everybody wants a reliable grid. The grid is reliable enough today. I think technology coming in with digital, technology with storage will help amplify that out, and I think we'll come out with the right outcome.
Greg, any last comments on that?
No, I mean, I think I agree with the question that Governor or Secretary Perry has asked. I think I would argue that he sort of framed it maybe a little bit one-sided, and so I think that's a fair criticism as we see it play out.
I want to ask one more question about the federal landscape, which of course has changed so dramatically since President Trump won. Now, of course, today the budget is coming out. The budget is less important, I think, at least the budget proposal from the administration, given Congress is very unlikely to pass it in any form close to what the president has proposed. But one other thing that Congress has been talking about, which Karen, you hit on, is that Congress may tackle comprehensive tax reform, which some say could jeopardize the current deal that was put in place at the end of 2015 for these tax credits, the production tax credit for wind and also the investment tax credit for solar. So another pithy question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all and 10 being a necessary component, how important is this current deal to your business plans and investment plans over the next 5 to 10 years? Tristan?
I think I can answer for all 10. But
Yeah, but I also think when the longer term you make it, administrations come and go, things change, we adapt. I mean, we do tend, as a business, will adapt. So I'm a little more hopeful that, working together as we're trying to do with the administration, that positive things will come out and it won't be a 10 for 10 years.
Can you pick a number?
Yeah, look, I'd say 10 too. I think, to make investments, we need a stable, reliable, political landscape. As long as it's stable and reliable, we can all thrive out there. If it's not stable, it really puts us all in a bind. So I think it's a 10. It's a 10 because it's stability.
Greg, what about you?
For us, I mean, my business, we've got an operational portfolio that's got some age on it, so I think for that piece it's not as big of impact, but we certainly are trying to grow this business as a lot of people in this room, and I think for that it's clearly a 10 plus. As far as the extension, the deal that was cut, I think that needs to be preserved. I think the broader tax reform really is the bigger question.
Do any of you think are any of you planning to try to ask Congress to extend the production tax credit more after this current deal? Broader than what this current deal did, the 5-year?
personally, I think that, sorry to answer all. Greg, go ahead.
No, as the chairman of the board, you should answer this question, right?
So I think that so the answer to your question is no. We're not planning to ask for an extension. The bigger issue for me is having fair market rules. As I said, protect legacy investments and plan for the future for the grid that we want to have, which will be much more agile, much more decarbonized, much more digital, and much more distributed. So I think that we have time. The nice thing about the PTC window is that we have 4, 5, 6 years and we see declining costs, so we have time to plan. It is the right time to take the time to look at all the facts and plan what is going to look like. What are the market rules? Honestly, paying just for energy, for electrons, and not recognizing the other value attributes that power generation equipment are bringing, doesn't make sense. You're just paying one dimension, and if you want to have a balanced system, you need to recognize the value of each one of them.
Great. Well, as Washington has been adjusting to the new administration, a lot else has been going on in the industry. I want to switch briefly to some of the news on the merger front. So Karen and Pete, I know your companies have both been part of mergers and acquisitions lately, both that were inked just a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago. Siemens and Gamesa, whose combined power puts you active in some 90 countries. And then GE requiring LM Wind with a similar global reach. We hear a lot of talk about big oil and big coal. Is this the beginning of big wind? And why was this good for your companies? And in 5 years, do you see a consolidation like this, even more so across the industry? Karen, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I think most industries sooner or later go through some sort of a consolidation as the market rules change and things. So I think we're in that phase right now for Latin Wind. For Gamesa and Siemens, it was really a very logical choice. We're very balanced geographically. You mentioned 90 countries. We're also in 30 states within the U.S. We have a very broad portfolio. We have a nice order backlog of over 10 billion. We think we bring very good synergies to each other because we have a heavier presence in North America. They had a heavier presence in other parts of Europe and Asia. And so it just made sense, and we're really looking forward to what that means for us to be together.
Okay, Pete, so what was GE's thinking in this purchase?
I'd say first at the macro level, there's a lot of capacity out there, and I think there's going to be more consolidation, more hyphenated OEMs out there in the distant future. I think for us, anytime we can find scale or technology that helps us lower our customers' LCOE, we're going to make those kinds of investments. And it's difficult to be in the wind business without being excellent with blades. LM is excellent with blades, and it's a compelling proposition for us, and I think ultimately for our customers out there.
Now, Greg, you're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum as a smaller company, relatively speaking, to these companies with huge global reaches. How are you operating in this environment that is increasingly consolidated? And do you think you'll be merging with anybody soon?
Well, I mean, not to be Captain Obvious, but I think scale matters in this business, right? And so I think you've seen, as you just talked about, the technology providers are consolidating because the investment required there, I think, to be successful as we keep driving efficiency through the business and cost down are there. For us, like a lot of folks here that are owners and operators of assets, scale matters. And so I think, it's great that we're, a 1,500 megawatt sort of portfolio, and that I was thinking about, for a lot of familiar faces in the room, 2011, that would have been sort of a top 10 owner in the industry. If you look at, we've grown 75% megawatts in the U.S. since then. Yet I think the number 10 player in the top 10 Bragawatt list is doubled in size. And I think so there's already been some consolidation that's happened in the industry. And I think it's both a good thing and an eventuality, right? So for us, we are wanting to grow our existing portfolio, and I think some of that could come through more M&A or consolidation approach.
One common talking point that we hear out of the administration is how important it is to be made in America. Do you think some of these acquisitions are going to enable the industry to have more manufacturing plants here in America? Or is there not a direct correlation there? Karen, do you want to start on that?
Well, I think with any level of investment, any business is going to do the same thing. They're going to look at the market and the opportunities there. They're going to look at how do you want to fill those, what is the cost of that associated with it. So yes, I do think that there might be some more opportunities for that, but time will tell as we work our way through. We have Safe Harbor and the 2020 PTC. You'll see.
Just on this, I mean, in the late 2000s, at the booming time of the wind industry, the market started to be big enough that we could, as a customer, demand from the suppliers to have manufacturing sites in the US. Wind turbines are big, they're heavy, they don't travel well. So it's an industry that is much more dependent on the health, the size, and the stability of its domestic market than on any other policy. We want, as a customer, to have the turbine manufacturer in the US. It's the case today for 2/3. Then you have some components like electronics and things that are optimized and can travel well. I think that this is not, wind will be localized. It is localized today. This is the debate that's behind us. The future will be local manufacturing.
What percentage of your wind farms here in the U.S. are manufactured here?
I think, well, I cannot answer, but well, actually I can. Pretty much all of them. They have some foreign component, but I mean, you know, in the car industry, the highest U.S. component is Toyota, right? In the U.S. So it's a little bit the same thing. Siemens, Vestas, they manufacture in the U.S. They buy some parts here and there, but overall, the supply chain is localized largely. So again, I think this is not really, this is past. This is from the last decade.
Well, you should
Sorry.
you should tell President Trump that then. He might like to hear.
Happy to discuss with him anytime.
Tristan, I have another question for you on a related topic. So I understand that your company is pairing up with a coal company in Kentucky to bring the first large-scale solar farm to Appalachia. Of course, we're in a wind audience here, but can you talk about how important state policies are to deciding where you invest? And could you see similar deals like that being struck on the wind side of your company?
So on the last question, yes, I can see a lot of that happening, a lot of this kind of deal happening where we represent a future. We're a new industry, new technology, and it is very natural that wind project and solar project replace the local jobs of old technology. So I would even argue that when you look at the fact that 86% of wind projects are located into Republican district and most of them in the wind corridor, they're pretty heavy, you know, manufacturing, all industry type. It is already happening. That specific story has got a lot of coverage because it's very emblematic of a solar company and a coal company. But overall, this is just one of the many examples in the history of the US where a new technology, a new industry is replacing the old one. And we need to adapt, we need to have some empathy, we need to understand the local population and help them to convert to a new industry, and we'll be happy to do that.
Great. So there's already been a lot of talk this morning about how wind power is increasingly able to be a baseload power itself that is very reliable into itself, that it can be, that wind can balance out wind. As a reporter, it's my job to try to play devil's advocate no matter what the position is. So in that vein, what's so bad about admitting that wind can be a big part of the electric pie, but that it can and should be complementary to other sources such as natural gas?
Nothing? I'm okay with that. Yes?
What about you, Karen?
I'm okay with that too. I have a fossil background before wind, so.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just add, wind can be complementary to solar. You know, one of the things we're spending a lot of time on is a wind-solar hybrid turbine, and I think that really solves a lot of those issues.
Greg, what about you? Do you think that there can be this you know, rhetoric that's complementary to both wind balancing out other sources of energy?
Yeah, I think part of our focus needs to be that, you know, wind is not a big problem as far as reliability and intermittency as much as some of the characterization has been made. But clearly, you know, I think whether it be the big utilities that have obligations to manage their grid or utility or grid operators, the all of the above has to be, I think, still part of the key message. And so, you know, it would be, I think, a mistake for us to even try to play offense and say, we don't need more gas plants or even to try to take on the coal plants. That's going to take care of itself, I think, with economics and other drivers.
So on this related note, you know, there's so much really fascinating technology here, and I hope to be able to see some of it after this panel. One area that I'm particularly interested in, which we've touched on a little bit, is the storage, of course, regarding the reliability and then also transmission. So on the storage component, I mean, what is it that's on the horizon in your companies? That is it more things like pump storage? Is it balancing wind with solar, for example? I mean, what are some of the top issues that you're looking at on the storage front?
Okay. So I think battery storage is key. It is the cost curve is going down dramatically. It's not yet large scale and full scale, but we can see that a little bit like solar 10, 15 years ago, we can see the first inroad of some profitable application, and I think that's going to grow from being, you know, minuscule to small to pretty big and then big eventually. So battery storage is one. And then the second key thing, and there are multiple technology, but the second big one is really what's called the smart grid. I don't really like this term, but the ability to basically manage the capacity on a transmission line based on the thermal readings. I mean, with that, you can solve a lot of stability issue and the demand side management. So the grid is going to be completely different 10 years from now, and we have to project ourselves. We do have time to prepare. We're still single-digit market share for wind in terms of energy. So, you know, wind doesn't want to replace tomorrow every 100% of the power generation in the US. It's going to be a long evolution that we have to prepare now. But clearly, battery storage and big data managed in real time to be able to have a dynamically managed grid is critical.
Do you guys have any other thoughts on the storage?
That was pretty complex. I think you covered almost everything there. And I think all companies are obviously either watching or investing, and really keeping our eye on it. It's important to our future.
I'd say it's sort of all of the above. I think it's what Tristan said. I'd throw on pump storage. We're doing a lot of that around the world. And I think the hybrid, solar-wind hybrid is not a pure storage opportunity, but it addresses the same issue. And I think it's a suite of solutions.
Greg?
Well, I think the learning curve is still the one piece that has to make progress, right? I mean, solar, everybody thinks about a battery and a solar panel as a similar DC device, and you throw it out there, and I think solar, for the most part, has proven that it does what it's supposed to do. The batteries, for many people in the room that have invested there, the learning curve is still coming up, the piece on just the pure performance piece, beyond the fact that we need to go from $1,000 to maybe $350 today to $100 down the road for the battery cost side. So, but I do think it's going to be a trend. You look at the prediction, there's 2,500 megawatts maybe today, I think, that are installed through the U.S., and the forecast is in the next 8-10 years you're going to have 10x that. So no doubt it is going to be a factor, and it's going to be a benefit.
Great. Well, we just have time for one more question, and it's going to be a concluding lightning round. So if you can keep your answers quite short, I would appreciate it. And I know none of us are official forecasters, so don't worry too much. You're not going to be stuck too much to what I'm about to ask you. But so wind accounted for about 8% of the operating electric generating capacity in the U.S. last year, more than any other renewable source, according to the Energy Information Administration. Where do you think that number will be in the year 2067 or 50 years from now? So it's 8% today. Where do you think it'll be in 50 years?
Well, higher. Is that short enough? I don't know. I think in 67? That's a good question. I think it could be in the 40s.
40s? Karen?
I think a lot of that may be due to what happens with our tax reform. If it's done well and properly, I think investments in this type of industry, as well as levelizing the playing field, I think it could be in the 40s as well.
Yeah, look, I'd say it's going to be higher. I'm with Tristan. I'm new to this industry. I've been here for 3 months, and I've won the jackpot. I mean, really won the jackpot. There's a lot of industries I've worked in that have asymptotic growth, right? And they're, pick your industry, and I've worked in a lot of. We got exponential growth in this business, and I think as long as we continue to kind of win that LCOE race, I think the sky's the limit. I don't know that it's worth sort of prognosticating. It's let's go win that LCOE, and it'll reach its entitlement. It's going to be a long.
You think it's higher than the 40s?
I think it can be, for sure. Yeah.
What about you, Greg?
Yeah, I'll give you a bullish answer. I'm going to give it a nice even 50, right? I think clearly I'm a buyer of the technology advancements that Karen and Pete's companies are making, and a lot of other people. You walk around the floor. I think while everyone sort of is very focused and buys the message that solar has this better glide path, I think there's still going to be some bumps in the road there on whether it be short-term import policy or other things, and I just think it's going to continue to be a march on, and that maybe get to half.
Great. Well, I want to thank our panelists for this great panel. I think we ended on a good, hopeful note. And I want to hand things back to Ed.